Death is not the end. I understand that this can sound like wishful thinking, or like religious consolation, or like something said at funerals to comfort the grieving. But I am not speaking as a priest or as a philosopher offering comforting claims about souls or afterlives. I am speaking as a physicist who has spent 60 years studying the deepest laws of nature. What physics tells us, what the mathematics requires, is that information is never destroyed. Every thought you have ever had, every choice you have made, every moment of your existence is encoded permanently in the geometry of space-time. That fact changes how death must be understood. My name is Roger Penrose. I received the Nobel Prize for work showing that black holes are inevitable consequences of Einstein's equations. But the question that truly occupied me was not simply whether black holes exist. It was what happens to information that falls into them. That question, what happens to information, is central to our understanding of existence itself. The conclusion is straightforward, though its implications are not. Information is eternal. It cannot be destroyed. Not by black holes, not by the heat death of the universe, and not by biological death. To see why, it is useful to begin with the view most people take. The materialist position holds that consciousness is produced by the brain. Neurons fire, chemicals move, and somehow subjective experience emerges. When the brain stops functioning, when neuronal activity ceases, consciousness ends. You cease to exist. The information that constituted you, your memories, personality, and experiences, is erased, as though it had never been there. At first glance, this view appears consistent with physics. Brains are physical systems. They obey the laws of thermodynamics. The second law tells us that entropy increases, which is often interpreted to mean that information is lost, scrambled into noise, and ultimately destroyed. The brain decays. The atoms disperse. The patterns that encoded memory dissolve. You, understood as an information structure, are said to vanish. This conclusion, however, is incorrect, deeply and fundamentally so. The reason comes from quantum mechanics and from black holes, two subjects that seem far removed from questions of death, but are in fact directly relevant. In the 1970s, Stephen Hawking showed that black holes emit radiation, now known as Hawking radiation. This result was revolutionary. It implied that black holes are not perfectly black. They emit faint thermal radiation and, over extraordinarily long timescales, they evaporate. A black hole gradually radiates away its mass and eventually disappears. This led to a serious problem. Hawking's calculations indicated that the radiation is purely thermal, completely random, and carries no information about what fell into the black hole. If an encyclopedia were thrown into a black hole, and the black hole later evaporated, the outgoing radiation would consist only of heat. The information contained in the encyclopedia would be gone. This would mean that information is destroyed. Such destruction violates quantum mechanics, which requires that information be conserved. This conflict became known as the black hole information paradox. Hawking argued that information is destroyed. I argued that it must be preserved. We formalized the disagreement as a bet. For many years, the debate continued. My position was simple. The mathematics of quantum mechanics does not allow information to be lost. There must be a mechanism by which it survives. In 2004, Stephen conceded the point. He announced publicly that he had been wrong, and that information must indeed be preserved. He paid the bet with a baseball encyclopedia. The essential result is this. Information is not lost inside a black hole. Instead, it is encoded on the event horizon, the boundary of the black hole itself. The horizon acts as a kind of holographic surface. Every bit of information that falls toward the black hole leaves an imprint there. When the black hole eventually evaporates, that information is released back into the universe through subtle correlations in the Hawking radiation. The conclusion is unavoidable. Information is not destroyed, eventually released. If this is true for black holes, the most extreme environments in the universe, where space-time curvature becomes extreme, then it is true everywhere. Information cannot be destroyed under any circumstances. Now apply this to you. You are not only matter. You are information, a pattern, a structure. Your memories are information states instantiated in your brain. Your personality is information encoded in neural connections. Your moment-to-moment consciousness consists of information being processed through physical processes in neurons. At the most basic level, you are information organized in a particular way. When you die, the brain stops functioning. The processing ends. But the information does not disappear. It cannot. The laws of physics do not allow it. Every thought you had, every experience you lived, every choice you made occurred. Each of those events took place in space-time. Space-time is not a stage on which events happen and then vanish. It is a four-dimensional structure. Events do not unhappen. Once they occur, they are permanent features of the geometry. In Einstein's general theory of relativity, space-time is a four-dimensional continuum, 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. Time is not fundamentally different from space. It is another dimension of the same structure. Within this framework, your entire life, from birth to death, exists as a worldline, a continuous path through space-time. At any given moment, you experience only one point along that path. But from the perspective of space-time itself, all points along the worldline are equally real. Your past does not exist merely as memory or record. It exists as part of the space-time geometry itself. When you die, your worldline ends. It reaches a final point, but nothing that came before is erased. All of it remains. Consider a simple analogy. If you draw a line on a piece of paper, the line exists. When you stop drawing, the line does not disappear. It remains complete from beginning to end. Your life is analogous to such a line, drawn in the four-dimensional geometry of space-time. Death is the point at which the drawing stops. The line itself remains. This is not metaphor. It follows directly from physics. The Bloch universe interpretation of general relativity holds that all moments in time exist equally. The present is not privileged. The past does not cease to exist simply because we are no longer located within it. Your life, your experiences, and your conscious moments are all part of the permanent structure of space-time. There is more. Not only does your worldline persist, but the information associated with you spreads outward through the universe via physical interaction. Every choice you made, every observation you performed, every physical interaction you participated in created correlations with the surrounding world. Whenever you interact with something, you become physically correlated with it. When photons from the sun reach your eyes and are absorbed, when your brain processes that signal, physical states become linked. These correlations are described precisely by quantum mechanics. They are not mystical. They are physical relationships between states. Once correlations are created, they do not remain localized. They propagate. Photons that interacted with you go on to interact with other particles. Air molecules you exhaled collide with others. The gravitational field associated with your mass influences nearby matter. Each interaction generates further correlations. Over time, this process produces a vast network of information linking you to the rest of the universe. The correlations spread. They accumulate. In principle, they extend without bound. You are therefore not an isolated system. You are not a separate entity that appears briefly and then vanishes without trace. You are physically entangled with the universe through countless interactions. That entanglement is information. Information about you is encoded in the quantum state of the cosmos. That information cannot be destroyed. I now want to connect this to conformal cyclic cosmology. In this framework, the universe undergoes an infinite sequence of cycles, known as eons. Each eon begins with a Big Bang and evolves toward a state of heat death. The end of one eon becomes the beginning of the next. Crucially, information is not lost between them. The mechanism is subtle. In the very distant future, when the universe has expanded without bound, when all matter has decayed and all black holes have evaporated, what remains is radiation. Radiation travels at the speed of light, and from its perspective, time does not pass. For a photon, the entire future history of the universe is effectively instantaneous. Through a mathematical operation known as conformal rescaling, a transformation that preserves angles while discarding absolute scales, this infinite future can be mapped onto a finite boundary. That boundary becomes the Big Bang of the next eon. The geometries match precisely. The mathematics is exact. Information from one eon can pass into the next, encoded in the conformal structure of that boundary. In this sense, the information that constituted you does not merely persist within this eon. It passes forward. Not as a conscious entity, not as a soul, but as geometric information embedded in spacetime itself. It becomes part of the initial conditions of the next universe. This is not reincarnation. You do not return as someone else. There is no continuation of personal consciousness. But the information that described you, the choices you made, the physical states you influenced, the correlations you created, contributes to the structure of the next eon. It becomes woven into the fabric of the universe that follows. Your existence has permanent consequences, not only within this cosmic cycle, but across cycles. At this point, an objection naturally arises. This is not survival in any familiar sense. It is not immortality. You will not be conscious in the next eon. You will not remember your life. If that is so, why does any of this matter? That concern is valid. This is not the afterlife promised by religion. There is no continuation of subjective experience. When the brain stops functioning, consciousness ends. That is death. What matters is something else. Your life was real, permanently real. You were not a transient anomaly in an otherwise meaningless universe. You were not a brief flicker of awareness in inert matter. You were a structured pattern of information participating in the fundamental processes of reality. You collapsed quantum states. You made choices. You generated correlations. All of this is encoded irreversibly in the structure of spacetime. Not because a deity observes it, and not because a cosmic narrative requires it, but because the universe is governed by the conservation of information. Information cannot be erased. Your existence is a physical fact, as real as the curvature of spacetime around the sun, as real as the Big Bang itself. This alters how death must be understood. Death is not annihilation. It is not erasure. It is the end of subjective experience, the end of consciousness actively processing information. But it is not the end of you as an information structure. You become past rather than present. And the past is real. It exists in spacetime just as surely as the present does. Consider ancient civilizations: Egypt, Rome, the Maya. The people who lived then are dead, yet their existence is unquestionable. Their world lines are part of spacetime. Their actions shaped history. Their presence had consequences that extend forward to us. They are real in the four-dimensional sense. And so are you. Right now, you are forming your world line. Every choice, every moment becomes a permanent feature of reality's structure. When you die, that structure does not disappear. It becomes complete. Your world line ends, but it remains whole, fixed, and real within spacetime. This is why I devoted my life to physics. Physics tells us what is real. And what it tells us is that the universe is not merely matter obeying laws. It is information structured by geometry. Consciousness is how that information is locally experienced. Death is not the destruction of information. It is the completion of a pattern. You are not observing the universe from outside it. You are a part of the universe, participating in its processes. When local processing ends, when the brain ceases to function, the information that constituted you does not vanish. It remains, not as a ghost or a soul, but as a permanent structure within spacetime, physically entangled with the rest of the universe and contributing to the conditions of what follows. This is not insignificant. It has direct implications. It means that events matter. Choices matter. Each action, each interaction, each moment of experience becomes a fixed part of reality's structure. What happens is not provisional. It is recorded, irreversibly, in the geometry of spacetime. You exist once, fully. That existence is not undone by death. It is completed. Your life is a four-dimensional structure, a world line, embedded in spacetime. It does not continue or repeat, but it does exist as a timeless fact. This is not a philosophical preference. It follows from physics. It follows from the requirement that information is conserved. Black holes demonstrate this. Quantum mechanics enforces it. The information structure that was you cannot be destroyed. Death marks the end of processing. It marks the end of consciousness and experience. It does not mark the end of existence. You were real. That fact cannot be reversed. In physics, existence is not temporary. Once something has occurred, it is permanently part of reality. As the universe evolves toward its far future, and as one cosmic cycle gives way to the next, the information that once defined you remains present, not conscious, not aware, but physically encoded and causally relevant. It contributes. It shapes. It persists as part of the overall structure. You are not temporary in the sense that matters here, not because you persist indefinitely as an individual, but because you existed at all. In the four-dimensional geometry of spacetime, to exist is to exist permanently. This is what physics tells us. This is what the conservation of information means. Death is not erasure. It is the final point on a world line. The world line itself remains. You will die, but there is no physical sense in which you will ever not have existed. And in physics, that distinction is decisive. Death is not the end. It is the completion. And completion, once achieved, is permanent.